Those who dated someone in adult entertainment. What was it like? Story 1. Freshman year of college, I started dating a guy I had known from high school, right before he got into the adult film industry. He was upfront about his work, and we discussed boundaries early on. Things started off okay until he repeatedly asked if he could record us during private moments. I always said no, it just wasn't something I was comfortable with. A few weeks into our relationship, a friend reached out to catch up. I casually mentioned my boyfriend, and they asked if I was in one of his recent videos. I said no, of course, but curiosity got the best of me. I checked his profile, and there I was, filmed from behind in a very degrading video. I had no idea he had recorded me. When I confronted him, devastated and angry, his only response was, "I'm just hard-headed, I guess." He did take it down, but he didn't show any real concern for how violating it had been. I ended the relationship immediately and blocked him everywhere. We haven't spoken since. Story 2. A girl I dated in high school later became an escort and amateur content creator. Back then, she was the picture of a church-going student, Bible studies, vows to stay pure, the whole image. But in private, things were very different. Our chemistry was wild, and the first time caught me completely off guard. We dated until graduation. She was headed to a private college where her dad was a professor, and I stayed local. We tried to stay connected, mostly casually. One time she told me she was seeing an older man who paid for her apartment but wasn't exclusive. Looking back, I think she was a sugar baby. Later, she moved into cam work. A few years after that, she called me asking for a ride from the police station. She'd been arrested. She said it was a misunderstanding involving a guy who offered her money to spend time together, but turned out to be an undercover officer. We stopped talking after that. She texted me months later asking for $900, claiming her brother Marcus was in jail. I reminded her she only had a sister. She admitted Marcus was actually her boyfriend/manager. I said no. Last I heard, Marcus was arrested in connection with an escorting operation. She's since moved to Colorado to start over. Wild times. Story 3. Back in college around 2007 or 2008, I dated a woman who had recently moved from California. She lived in what she jokingly called Corn Valley. I think she meant San Fernando, and had done adult films right after high school. She made decent money and then moved east for school. Dating her was intense. She was independent to a fault, did whatever she wanted, and constantly seemed to test me for insecurity, which I didn't have. She paid for everything and didn't like when I tried to contribute. The physical side of our relationship wasn't great. She was focused on her own experience and would get frustrated if I couldn't keep going after she finished. She was self-absorbed and mainly talked about herself. One day, she didn't show up to our study meetup, and when I went to her apartment, she casually said, "Sorry, I'm seeing someone else now." I saw her with a new guy a few times after that, always some super fit guy. A semester later, we had a class together, and I don't think she even remembered my name. Honestly, I'm just glad I didn't get too emotionally involved. Story 4. I went on a few dates with a woman I met online. The first time we met, she invited me over and asked me to bring shawarma. She was casual, no makeup, low-key outfit, and everything was just chill. On our second date, we went clubbing in West Hollywood. This time, she looked amazing. Dressed up, makeup done, and full of energy. We had a great time and ended up back at her place. We connected physically, but it wasn't just physical, it felt deeply personal. The next day, she did an interview, I think with Playboy Radio, and casually talked about our date, without naming me. She described it positively, saying she was taking things slow. We went out once more, but after that, she got really busy and eventually stopped responding. Later, I found out she had moved to Vegas suddenly and deleted her social media. Years later, she reactivated her accounts and said she'd left the industry and wanted a quieter life. Her content became more modest. She was always kind to me, but I sensed something deeper going on. I truly hope she found peace. Story 5. I was married to someone who became very successful on OnlyFans. In day-to-day life, she wasn't anything like her online persona. We had been married for several years before she started, and she stopped after a few years. Our eventual divorce had nothing to do with the content work. The money was great, it paid for cars, vacations, and more. But even before her online career, she wasn't a great partner. I worked more hours and helped market her content, spending up to 20 hours a week editing and promoting. She never once cooked or helped out much around the house. The breaking point was when I reconnected with my lifelong crush at a funeral. We admitted our feelings and I decided to give it a real shot. It worked out amazingly. Looking back, the physical side of my marriage had always been average, and I basically taught her everything. No regrets in moving on. Story 6. I dated a woman I met on a dating app. A couple of months in, I found out she was on OnlyFans and making a surprising amount of money. I started wondering when she casually bought 2 PS5s in one day. She was laid back, recently divorced, and our time together was a lot of fun. The physical connection was amazing. I asked about her content, and she showed me some mostly solo material and a few older clips with her ex-husband. She got flooded with messages from fans, but said she never took it beyond that. We briefly talked about making content together, but I wasn't comfortable. I have unique tattoos and didn't want to mix business with intimacy. We stayed together for a while, but life got busy, and we naturally drifted apart. Story 7. When I was 19, I dated a girl who was the complete opposite of me. Bold, fearless, and unpredictable. She used to say I was the kindest guy she had ever dated. Her life was rough, though. Her dad was a Scientologist, and she told me stories about being taken advantage of by older men in the church. One night, while we were together, I felt a sudden stinging pain. I turned on the light and saw that she had used a small razor blade and cut me during the moment. I told her to stop, but she did it again. She had a taste for extremes. Eventually, she left me for someone abusive. He got her hooked on substances and pushed her into adult films. She became a rising name for a while. We kept in touch occasionally, mostly when she was struggling. She got clean, had a child, then relapsed and passed away a year later. We only dated for a summer, but she left a permanent impression on me. I still think about her and hope her child got the best parts of her. Story 8. I worked behind the scenes in adult film during the 80s and 90s. I dated a few performers back then, but it was usually just casual. One day, I was filming a scene and ended up chatting with one of the actresses while we waited for someone else to arrive. We talked for 2 hours. I asked if she wanted to grab dinner. She said yes. Long story short, we're still married today. So yeah, the first time I met my wife, I was filming her working with another performer. Life is strange like that. Story 9. I dated a dancer who later went into adult films in Miami. Sadly, she passed away due to substance issues. I'm still deeply affected by it. She was one of the kindest, most generous people I've ever known. She had a difficult life. Abuse, addiction, and trauma. But she was also tough, funny, and incredibly loyal. I saw her step in to defend strangers and win fights despite her small frame. She was my best friend. Her past never bothered me. I understood that she had been through a lot, and I never judged her. When she died, I was in rehab. I relapsed after hearing the news but eventually got clean again. I've been sober for 4 years now. I still miss her every day. Story 10. I dated 3 different women who had worked in adult entertainment. None of the relationships were serious, but they were eye-opening. All 3 had similar traits. They were slow to open up emotionally, had struggles with substances, and used intimacy as their way of expressing affection. They were generous, sweet, and fun, but I could tell they were dealing with personal pain. I never expected anything long-term, and things ended without drama. We all just drifted apart. One of them is still working in the industry, one moved behind the camera, and one married a wealthy guy and left it all behind. I hope they're doing okay. They were kind souls going through tough things. Story 11. I was young and from a small town. She, on the other hand, had already experienced a lot. She'd been picked by a major magazine and had spent years working in clubs. We met in astronomy class, and after the girl I had a crush on stopped showing up, my now ex swooped in and asked for my number. She invited me to the club where she worked, and I thought she was just trying to get a customer out of me. But no, she actually liked me, or at least wanted to get close. We spent a few wild days together doing a lot of partying, and suddenly we were official. She made it clear that our relationship could only work if I was okay with her lifestyle, smoking often and being with another woman she liked. I said yes because I was young and eager. I moved in with her almost immediately, but after a few months, she got distant and ended things. A few days later, she found out she was pregnant. She didn't want to keep it, and I supported her through the process. We tried to make it work again, but things became messy. Eventually, we both gave up. We still interact once in a while on social media. I think she's out of the industry now and has a child. I still wish her well. I also still cringe at how immature I was back then. Story 12. I once dated a guy whose ex had been a well-known actress in adult films. The story he told me was pretty wild. His family had owned a video rental store back when VHS was booming. They'd go to events at big mansions, and that's where he met her. They dated for years. He ran a construction business and she did films part-time. He wanted her to quit and settle down, but she wasn't ready to give up the freedom or the money. Eventually, they broke up and he took it really hard. By the time I came along, he had trouble seeing women the same way. He pursued me intensely at first, but it felt like he was still stuck in that old relationship. I could never shake the feeling that he saw me through a filter of disappointment. We never really got off the ground, and I still think the industry left a lasting mark on him. Story 13. I dated a young woman who had done a few adult scenes with known producers. On our first date, she told me what she did. I was surprised, but she was incredibly attractive and had a vibrant personality, so I was still interested. We dated on and off for about a year. She was fun, smart, and really kind to me, but she had some deep self-esteem issues and seemed to always be looking for approval, especially from older men. There was definitely a father figure dynamic going on. The intimacy was amazing. She often said she wanted to practice things for upcoming scenes, and I was game. She could switch between being playful and deeply connected in a way that felt very real. But the gap in our life stages made things complicated. Eventually, we drifted apart. I still think about her a lot. We were both filling a void in each other at the time. Maybe if we'd met later in life, it could have been something more. Story 14. I've dated two women who had worked in adult content. One followed the well-known path of dancer to model to performer. The other was more recent, a content creator during the pandemic. The first one was amazing. She was kind, grounded, and had already left the industry by the time we met. She's a realtor now and doing great. She started dancing and modeling to pay for school, took a few roles to make extra money, and then got out before it consumed her. The second woman was different. She started OnlyFans during the pandemic and got obsessed with it. At first, it was just solo content, and she even involved me in a few videos without showing my face. But once her follower count started dropping, everything changed. She became fixated on getting more attention. It wasn't about money anymore, it was about validation. She started talking about doing collaborations and getting cosmetic procedures. When she showed up one day with exaggerated features and suggested a group video, I realized I couldn't keep up with where she was heading. We broke up that day. During that time, I met several successful content creators, and honestly, most of them were not people I'd ever want to date. Story 15. As a teen, I had a long-distance relationship with a girl who later went into amateur content creation. I found out recently when I stumbled on a gallery and recognized her, even though her face wasn't visible. She'd been through a lot growing up, mistreated by people she dated, exposed to the wrong environments way too early. She used to talk to older men online when she was still in high school. I think it affected how she developed emotionally. She had a hard time with loyalty and would often act on impulse. Eventually, she transitioned and lives as a man now. I haven't spoken to them in years, but I hope they found peace. Story 16. I met a cam model at a bar about 8 years ago. We connected quickly and ended up spending the night together. I thought that would be the end of it, but a few months later she reached out again. Her place was surprisingly upscale. Turns out she was doing really well financially. She showed me some of her work, but I wasn't that interested. We'd go out for dinner and end up back at her place, just enjoying each other's company. She was sweet and always sent thoughtful messages, but I could tell she kept her life very compartmentalized. She stayed up late every night for work and was always tired. I liked her, but I knew I couldn't bring that relationship home to my family. We drifted apart over time. I'm in a great relationship now, but I still think back to her sometimes and hope she's doing well. Story 17. In 2017, I dated a girl who tried to hide the fact that she had been in adult films just 6 months before we met. The intimacy was amazing. She was open and adventurous, even suggested group encounters with her friends. Eventually, she came clean about her past. I was surprised but not upset. What changed things for me was learning she was using substances regularly. That was a deal breaker. Story 21. I dated a webcam model I met on Reddit. We had a ton in common: anime, hiking, and oddly enough, taxidermy. She was open about her job, and I respected her honesty. Things were fine until one day, I noticed she'd started streaming live while I was walking around her place. Shirtless, completely unaware I was in the background. She thought it was funny, but I didn't feel the same. I didn't sign up to be part of her content. We had a serious talk, she apologized, and I could tell she meant it, but something had shifted. We broke up soon after. We're still on good terms though. She runs a successful plush toy business now. Story 22. I went out with a guy in 2015 who used to do scenes for gay sites, though he didn't identify that way. He was very upfront and said he'd left that part of his life behind. He wasn't ashamed, just didn't think it mattered anymore. He was sweet, but emotionally distant. No matter how much time we spent together, he kept this wall up. We dated for about 6 months before he ghosted me completely. I later saw on social media that he was in a relationship with another former performer. They looked genuinely happy. No hard feelings from me. It just wasn't our time. Story 23. I matched with a woman on Bumble who called herself a freelance content creator. I didn't think much of it until she mentioned she had over 50,000 subscribers on her adult site. I was surprised but intrigued. She was confident, witty, and also into niche hobbies like mushroom foraging and puzzles. We had great chemistry, but I could never shake the feeling that she was always on, even when we were alone. Her career blurred into her personal life. Eventually, she told me she wanted someone who could truly support her without judgment. I realized I wasn't that person. We ended things respectfully. Story 24. Back in college, I dated a guy who worked as an escort. He told me on our 3rd date. I was surprised, but I appreciated the honesty. He was charming and generous, but I often felt like I was just another role in his day-to-day. Every compliment felt rehearsed. Every date felt like a well-practiced routine. After about 3 months, I asked him if he saw a future with me. He hesitated. That silence was enough. We ended it there. He messaged me a year later to say he'd gone back to school. I was glad he seemed to be doing well. Story 25. My ex was a burlesque dancer who started doing adult content during the pandemic. We were already together when she began, and at first it was just a side project. But over time, it became a huge part of her identity. She started measuring everything by her online performance: likes, followers, comments. Our conversations changed. I felt like I was dating a brand instead of a person. I tried to talk to her about it, but she said I was being unsupportive. We broke up shortly after. I still hope she found what she was looking for. She was incredibly talented and full of potential, just lost in the noise of it all. Story 26. I went out with a woman who made content focused on foot appreciation. She told me early on, and I didn't mind. She was funny and creative. We even made up silly nicknames for each other. But over time, I noticed she had trouble connecting emotionally. We'd go on a date, and it felt like she was mentally somewhere else. I once brought her flowers, and she looked at them like she didn't know what to do. She admitted she hadn't had a meaningful relationship in years and didn't really know how to be vulnerable anymore. We ended things gently. I hope she finds someone who can help her feel safe again. Story 27. My high school girlfriend moved to Europe and ended up working in adult films. Years later, she reached out while visiting family and asked to meet for coffee. We hadn't spoken in forever. She told me she had been out of the business for a while and was trying to start fresh. She said I was one of the few people who had treated her with respect. We didn't rekindle anything romantic, but the conversation was honest, and I was glad we got that moment of closure. She's now studying animal care. I still follow her journey online. She seems happy. Story 28. I dated a cosplay content creator I met at a convention. She made both outfits and videos and had a pretty big following. We clicked instantly. She was funny, nerdy, and full of energy, but even our private time started feeling like a performance. She couldn't separate her online identity from her real life. We'd go hiking and she'd turn it into a photo shoot. I started to feel like a prop in her feed instead of a partner. We broke up after a long talk. She thanked me for being supportive. I still check in on her sometimes. She's doing voiceover work now. Story 29. I dated a guy who used to make amateur videos with his ex. He told me after we'd been together for a few weeks and even showed me one. I wasn't jealous, until I realized he was still talking to her regularly. He said it was just about managing old content, but I started having doubts. Eventually, I asked him directly if he still had feelings for her. He didn't say anything. That silence told me everything. I thanked him for being honest and moved on. Some things you just can't share space with. Story 30. I met a woman at a jazz lounge. She was elegant, mysterious, and had a great sense of humor. A few dates in, she told me she worked as a dominatrix. She was incredibly composed and emotionally intelligent. Our relationship was unconventional. She was in charge, and I was okay with that for a while. But over time, I realized I wanted more balance and emotional vulnerability. She explained that in her work, she had to maintain control all the time, and it was hard for her to drop that wall. We ended things with mutual understanding. It was one of the most respectful breakups I've had. Story 31. Back in college, my roommate dated a guy who used to do adult films. She didn't know at first and was really upset when she found out. But surprisingly, after a week of crying and processing, she decided to stay with him. They dated for nearly 2 years. I never really understood it, but she said he was the first person to truly see her. He eventually left the industry, and they moved across the country together. Last I heard, they got married and started a small business. Life is unpredictable. Story 32. I dated someone who ran a fan site focused on adult content creators. He wasn't a performer himself, but he was deeply involved in that world. At first, it was interesting. He had all these behind-the-scenes stories and industry insights. But over time, I felt like I was competing with his obsession. He'd check analytics during dinner and talk about engagement rates more than our relationship. I finally told him I didn't want to feel like part of his brand strategy. He understood. We broke up, no drama, just different priorities. Story 33. She was an art student who paid for school through her content page. I admired her creativity. She painted during the day and filmed at night. We had a quiet, sweet relationship for a few months. One night, she said, "I do this so I can make my art, but sometimes I wonder if I'm giving up parts of myself to do it." I didn't really know how to respond. A few months later, she quit the platform and moved to Berlin to focus on her art full-time. I still follow her work online. She's doing great. Story 34. I dated a guy who used to act in adult parody films, think superhero spoofs with adult themes. He was hilarious, self-aware, and had a surprisingly romantic side. He'd tell these wild stories casually but never took himself too seriously. Despite that, he struggled with deeper emotions. One time, he told me, "After everything I've seen and done, I'm not sure I believe in love." That stuck with me. We ended things quietly, on good terms. Still one of the most unique people I've met. Story 35. She was a cam performer who only ever showed herself from the neck down. I didn't know until we were dating for a couple of months. When she finally told me, she was nervous, but I wasn't upset. What got to me was how guarded she was about everything else. Her past, her family, even her dreams. She kept it all locked away. I wanted to get to know the real her, but she wasn't ready to let anyone in. We ended things kindly. I hope she found someone who makes her feel safe enough to open up. Story 36. He was a retired performer who had become a personal trainer. We met at a climbing gym and hit it off right away. He seemed grounded, but every now and then, he'd share a story from his past that reminded me just how different our experiences were. He once said he felt like he had lived multiple lives and wasn't sure which one was real. I liked him a lot, but I always felt like I was dating someone who had already moved on from the kind of life I was still building. He eventually moved to Costa Rica to start a wellness retreat. I hope he found peace. Story 37. She specialized in extreme content, but in real life, she was soft-spoken and gentle. It was strange seeing someone who was so kind and quiet in person have such a bold online persona. She told me, "That's just a character. I don't even think about it." But I couldn't separate the two. I'd see her differently after watching her content, even though I knew it shouldn't matter. We ended things before it got too serious. She was understanding, and I appreciated that. Story 38. He was a barista by day and had done some amateur films in the past. I found out through a friend who recognized him and showed me a clip. It was a surprise, but when I asked him, he said, "It's just something I did a while back." He wasn't embarrassed, and I respected that. But emotionally, he wasn't available. He'd listen but never really open up. We dated for a few weeks and slowly drifted apart. No hard feelings, just not the right fit. Story 39. She had only worked in adult films for 6 months before quitting. We met at a local community event. She told me early on and looked nervous while saying it, like she expected me to walk away. I didn't. I told her it didn't matter to me, but it mattered to her. She carried a lot of guilt and self-doubt from that time. We dated for about a year, but the emotional weight became too much. She was one of the most sincere people I've ever met. I hope she's doing well wherever she is. Story 40. My ex's sister was a performer. At first, it didn't affect us, but when his family found out, they cut ties with her. He was devastated and didn't know how to handle the situation. He started pulling away from me, torn between his loyalty to his family and his love for his sister. Eventually, he moved to a new city to support her while she transitioned into a new career. I admired his strength, even though our relationship didn't survive. Sometimes doing the right thing means letting go of what's familiar. Story 41. She was a barista with a quick wit and a killer smile. We met during my morning coffee runs, and after a few weeks of banter, I asked her out. She said yes without hesitation. We clicked fast. She mentioned having a second job but didn't go into details. Said it was online consulting. I didn't think much of it. A few weeks in, I noticed she always went home on her lunch breaks, never stayed at the cafe, never grabbed food nearby. One day I asked about it and she finally told me. She was a cam performer. Nothing explicit, just suggestive content with a playful edge. She streamed live during her breaks, quick sessions, then back to work like nothing happened. She said it helped pay the bills and gave her freedom. I didn't judge her. If anything, I admired how composed she was. But what I couldn't get past was how carefully she kept everything else locked away. Her past, her real opinions, even her long-term goals, it all felt off-limits. I wanted to know her, not just the version she showed the world. But she wasn't ready for that. We ended things on good terms. I still think of her when I pass that cafe. She was sharp, confident, and carrying more than she ever let on. Story 42. We'd been dating for a few weeks when I found out he used to do adult films. It wasn't a secret, he told me himself casually, like it was just another job he used to have. I didn't care about that. What threw me was when I realized my mom followed him on social media, and had for years. She never said a word, but she definitely knew. He laughed it off. I didn't. That weird overlap between my life and his past made things feel off. We broke up not long after. He was a good guy, but some lines are just too strange to blur. Story 43. She invited me to dinner with her family. We'd only been seeing each other for a month, so I figured it was a meet the parents kind of thing. Turned out her entire family worked in adult content creation. They ran a full-on production company out of their home. Her mom handled logistics, her dad did lighting, and her older brother was the editor. They were nice people, surprisingly normal, but I wasn't ready for that kind of dynamic. She asked if I'd ever consider helping with the business. I told her I couldn't. We parted on good terms, but yeah, that one stuck with me. Story 44. I thought he was cheating on me. He kept disappearing at weird times, always guarded with his phone, always vague about where he'd been. One night I snooped. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. That's when I found out he was recording himself and uploading the videos online. Solo stuff. He'd been doing it for months. He said it wasn't cheating, just a side hustle. I said it was the lying that hurt, not the content. We broke up the next day. I wasn't mad about what he did, just that he didn't think I deserved the truth. Story 45. She was my high school crush. We reconnected years later, started talking, and eventually started seeing each other. Everything felt familiar and easy, until she invited me over and I saw her old bedroom transformed into a filming studio. Lights, props, camera setup, all of it. She told me she'd been working in adult content full-time and that this room was her main set. She was proud of what she built and I respected that. But the nostalgia clashed hard with reality. I realized I hadn't fallen for who she was. I was still clinging to a memory. We ended things soon after. Story 46. She was quiet, a little nerdy, always had a book in her bag. We bonded over poetry and late-night walks. Then one night, she told me she was the voice behind a popular adult audio series. Millions of followers, anonymous persona, no face, just her voice. I listened to one episode. It was surreal. People online adored her, but I knew almost nothing about her offline. I asked if she ever wanted to stop. She said no. People listen to me. That's more than I get in real life. That stuck with me. We drifted apart. I still think about how loud her silence felt. Story 47. He seemed like your average guy, normal job, good friends, loved dogs. We got along great. Then I met his friends and everything changed. They ran a private online forum where they rated adult performers. He wasn't just a contributor, he was their top-rated creator. I asked why he never told me. He said, "It's not who I am anymore." But the forum was still active and he still posted. I told him I couldn't be with someone who lived two lives. He didn't argue. We ended it that night. I don't think he ever really left that world behind. Story 48. He told me he was a filmmaker. Independent stuff, artistic projects. I thought it was cool. Then I found the locked folder on his computer. Turns out he'd been posting hidden camera content on a sketchy site. Stuff he filmed without telling anyone, including me. I confronted him. He swore I wasn't in any of it, but trust was gone. He didn't see the problem. "It's just content," he said. I left that night, reported the site. I don't know what happened after that, but I hope someone shut it down. Story 49. Matched with her on a dating app. She was fun, flirty, a little mysterious. After a few dates, she invited me over. Her apartment was different. Ring lights in every room, costumes on racks, a whiteboard with content schedules and usernames. Turns out she lived with 4 other creators in a content house. She casually asked if I wanted to collab on camera. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. I left pretty quickly after that. Nothing against her. It just wasn't the kind of relationship I was looking for. Story 50. We were a few months in when I found out he used to do parody films, adult comedy stuff. He told me himself like it was no big deal. Then I saw one by accident. A coworker showed it at a party, not realizing I was dating the guy in the lead role. I didn't tell anyone, but I couldn't unsee it. I asked him how he felt about that part of his life. He said he didn't think it mattered. Maybe it didn't to him, but it did to me. We broke up quietly. I still respect him, but I needed someone who saw the past as a part of the picture, not something to laugh off. Story 51. He was sweet, quiet, and a bit of a gym rat. We dated for a couple of months before I noticed he had a locked closet in his apartment. One night, he left the door slightly open. Inside were lights, props, and a bunch of costumes. He admitted he used to film adult scenes there. Said he hadn't in years, but sometimes thought about getting back into it. He wasn't ashamed. But it made me realize how little I really knew about him. We stayed friends, but I couldn't keep dating someone who still had one foot in a life he hadn't fully left. Story 52. She was soft-spoken, thoughtful, and really into philosophy. I liked that she never overshared, but then I found her podcast. It was anonymous, but her voice was unmistakable. She and her ex co-hosted it, telling detailed stories about their romantic lives, including her current one, me. I confronted her. She said it was therapeutic, and that no one knew it was real. But I felt exposed. We ended things not out of anger, but because I couldn't be someone else's content without knowing it. Story 53. She was a blind date set up by a coworker. We hit it off right away. Easy conversation, good energy, everything clicked. Later that night, I Googled her name out of curiosity. One of the top results was a documentary I'd seen years ago. She was in it, part of a controversial adult film project that got banned after release. I asked her about it the next day. She didn't deny it, just said, "That was a long time ago. I'm not that person anymore." I believed her, but part of me didn't know how to move past it. So I didn't. Story 54. He was polished, charming, the kind of guy who always knew the right thing to say. We dated for a while before I found out he used to be the face of an adult video game. It wasn't just a cameo, he was the main character. The game had sparked a lot of backlash when it came out. He said he still got royalties. He brushed it off like it was just another gig. I tried to be okay with it, but it always felt like there was a part of him still living in that character. We ended things quietly. Story 55. He invited me to help out with his creative project. I figured it was photography or some short film thing. It was an interactive live stream where strangers voted on what we'd do next. He had contracts, waivers, a whole system. I was stunned. He said it was just performance art and that it didn't mean anything. I disagreed. We broke up that night. I didn't care about the platform. I just didn't want to feel like I was one click away from being someone else's spectacle. Story 56. She ran online courses, said she helped people build confidence and income. I thought it was coaching or marketing. Later, I found out she was teaching people how to grow adult content brands, how to manipulate engagement, how to fake relationships, even how to stage drama for tips. She was good at what she did. But once I realized how calculated everything was, including how she'd been with me, I couldn't stay. I don't think she ever saw me as more than a test subject. Story 57. We'd been dating for a couple of months when he invited me to a party at a fancy apartment downtown. When I got there, it wasn't a party, it was a filming set. People were in costume. A camera crew was setting up, and someone handed me a release form. He said, "You don't have to be in it, but I thought you might want to see." I left without saying much. Not because I was offended by what they were doing, but because I didn't like how easily he assumed I'd be okay with being part of something I never agreed to. Story 58. I found out my boyfriend used to run a revenge site in college. He said it was just for shock value and that he took it down years ago. But I looked into it. The site was still live. He was still making money from old archived uploads. He said it wasn't personal, it was just business. I told him that if you're making money off someone else's pain, it's always personal. We were done after that. No second chances. Story 59. He was on a reality show years ago. I thought it was one of those dating competitions until someone sent me a clip. It was a fake show, set up to trick contestants into filming risque scenes under the pretense of challenges. Caused a scandal and he disappeared from the spotlight. He told me he didn't know what he'd signed up for. Said he felt humiliated. I believed him, but he still carried a lot of shame about it. It hung over everything. We tried, but he never really forgave himself. And I couldn't fix that. Story 60. She told me she had a top subscriber who supported her work. I didn't ask questions. Figured it was just part of the gig. Then I found out it was her ex. He paid thousands each month just to leave comments on her posts. She said it was harmless. I didn't think it was. There was too much history still alive in that thread. I asked her to set a boundary. She said it wasn't my place. Maybe she was right. So I left. Story 61. She told me she used to model, but never mentioned it was for an adult toy company. I only found out when a friend sent me a product link, with her name on the box. She wasn't embarrassed when I brought it up. Just said it paid well and didn't hurt anyone. I wasn't mad. I just didn't know how to process being so publicly connected to something so personal. Every time we went out, I wondered if someone recognized her, or us. We broke up a few weeks later. Not because of what she did, but because I realized I wasn't as open-minded as I thought. Story 62. He had a massive following on TikTok. I thought it was for fitness content, funny gym skits, that sort of thing. Then one day, someone told me to check his link in bio. It led to a subscription page I had no idea existed. He said he kept it separate on purpose. That he wanted me to like him for who he was, not for the persona. I respected that, but I also felt blindsided. Not because of what he did, but because he didn't trust me enough to tell me. We lasted a little longer, but the silence between us got louder. Eventually, we just stopped calling. Story 63. She was obsessed with privacy. No social media, no pictures, no tagging her in anything. I thought it was refreshing. Then I found out she had 2 secret accounts, both under different names, both with thousands of followers. One was for adult cosplay. The other was for feet pics. She said it wasn't personal, just business. I asked why she hid it. She shrugged. People judge. She wasn't wrong. But I wasn't judging. I just wanted honesty. We broke up when I realized she preferred being seen by strangers more than being known by someone close. Story 64. He told me he was a photographer. What he didn't mention was that his entire portfolio was adult content. I found out when I walked into his studio unannounced. A model was mid-shoot. They were both surprised, but not embarrassed. He explained everything. Said it paid the bills and let him work on his own terms. I tried to be okay with it. But every time he left for a session, I couldn't stop wondering what was really happening behind the lens. Eventually, I stopped asking. And that's when I knew it was over. Story 65. She worked in customer service, lived with a cat, and loved horror movies. Normal stuff. Then I opened her laptop to look up a recipe and saw she was logged into a fan page, with hundreds of custom requests. She was a digital dominatrix. Voice only, all anonymous. She explained it like it was just a character she played. Said it didn't cross her personal boundaries. I believed her. But I also saw a part of her I'd never met, and suddenly I wasn't sure if I ever really had. We ended things quietly. I hope she's still doing what makes her feel powerful. Story 66. We were together for 6 months before I found out he once went viral, on a prank channel that tricked people into adult-themed situations. He didn't talk about it. Said it was a phase. But people still recognized him. Once, someone approached us at dinner and quoted a scene. He laughed it off. I didn't. It wasn't the content that bothered me. It was the way he never really acknowledged how public his past was. Like he expected me to just roll with it. Eventually, I couldn't. Not because I judged him, but because I didn't want to be part of someone else's punchline. Story 67. She told me she was a writer. I imagined novels, maybe poetry. Turns out she ghost-wrote erotic fanfiction. A lot of it. Under multiple pen names, with huge followings and even merch. When I found out, she smiled. I never said what kind of writer. I wasn't upset. Just surprised by how much of herself she poured into stories no one in her real life ever got to see. We stayed together for a while. But I realized she was more vulnerable with her readers than with me. And I couldn't compete with a version of her I'd never meet. Story 68. He had a great voice. Deep, calming like a podcast host. He used to read to me when I had trouble sleeping. Months later, I found out he ran a late-night audio channel. It wasn't just stories, it was intimate role-play, whispered scripts, seductive lines. He'd never told me. I only found out when I recognized his voice on a viral TikTok. He wasn't hiding it out of shame. He just didn't think it mattered. But it did. Not because of what he said to strangers, because he never said those things to me. Story 69. She was always on her phone, but never talked about what she did online. When I asked, she said she ran a community. Turned out she moderated a massive adult storytelling forum. She wrote detailed narratives, gave advice, and even coached new writers. I read one of her stories. It was good. Too good. I told her I admired her creativity, but I also felt like she shared more of herself with anonymous readers than she did with me. She didn't disagree. Some people feel safer behind a screen. We ended things soon after. No hard feelings, just different ways of being known. Story 70. He told me he was trying to leave that life behind. He used to model for adult websites but said it was all in the past. Then I saw new photos posted under a different name. Same tattoos, same smile. Still active. I asked why he lied. He said, "I didn't lie. I just didn't want you to see me like that." It wasn't the photos that hurt. It was the fact that he thought I couldn't handle the truth. You can't build something real on half-truths. So I walked away, hoping he'd eventually stop hiding from himself. Story 71. She was one of the kindest people I'd ever met. Thoughtful. Funny in a quiet way. Always remembered the smallest things I said. We dated for about 4 months before I learned what she actually did for a living. She said she worked in digital media. I assumed that meant marketing or maybe editing. One night, though, I accidentally saw a notification pop up on her phone. A live tip from a streaming platform I didn't recognize. I asked her about it and she didn't flinch. She told me she was a live performer. Not nude, not explicit, but intentionally provocative. She played a character, took requests, and made real money doing it. She said it gave her control more than any 9 to 5 ever had. I wasn't angry. I actually admired how confident she was. But over time, I realized I didn't know where the character ended and the real her began. Felt like I was dating someone who always had a mask on. We ended it gently. No drama. Just the quiet understanding that we were on different wavelengths. Story 72. He was quiet, good with animals, and always made an effort to ask about my day. We were together for close to 5 months before I learned about his past. Came up during a random conversation about tattoos. He casually mentioned that one of his was done on a shoot. I asked what kind of shoot and he laughed, then said, "Adult film." It was a phase. I didn't know what to say. He wasn't defensive, just matter-of-fact. Said it helped him during a rough financial patch and he'd moved on since. I tried not to let it change how I saw him, but it did. Not because I judged him, but because I felt like I was just now meeting a version of him that had been kept hidden. We stayed together for another month or so, but it was different. I'd ask questions and he'd go quiet. I think we both realized we weren't building trust at the same pace. Story 73. She told me up front that she did modeling, but I didn't ask for details. I liked her energy. Playful, direct, always in control of the conversation. We hung out a lot, but it didn't get serious until a few months in. One night, she showed me her page. It was lingerie and cosplay content, softcore, but clearly curated for a very specific audience. She made good money, had a huge following, and saw it as performance art. I was impressed at first, but then I noticed how much of her time it consumed. Every meal was a potential photo, every outfit a costume. I started to feel like her side character, not her partner. I brought it up. She said, "This is who I am. I don't separate work and life." I realized I did, and that was the difference. We ended things respectfully. I still follow her work sometimes. She's thriving, just not in a way I could keep up with. Story 74. He was an open book, or so I thought. Funny, warm, always had a story to tell. We'd been dating for over 6 months when I found an old video of him circulating online. It was from a prank-based adult show he'd done years ago. He was younger, looked different, but unmistakably him. I asked about it, and he said he'd done a few episodes in college for quick cash. I was broke. It was legal. I moved on. But what got to me wasn't the content, it was the fact that he never mentioned it. I'd asked about his college years, and he always gave vague answers. When I asked why he didn't tell me, he said, "I didn't want to be that guy anymore." I understood. But I also felt like I was dating someone who only showed me half the picture. We didn't end on bad terms. Just slowly faded out. It's hard to build something real when parts of the past are still hidden. Story 75. She was a dancer, but not the club kind. At least that's what I thought. She mentioned working nights, said it was entertainment-based, and I didn't push it. Then one night, I showed up early to surprise her after work. She wasn't at the bar she claimed to be at. I waited. Called. Nothing. Later, she admitted she worked at a private club. Not illegal, not seedy, just exclusive. Rich clients, high tips, strict rules. She wasn't ashamed, just cautious. She said people changed how they looked at her the moment they found out. I told her I wasn't like that, and I believed it when I said it. But over time, I realized I felt distant, like I only knew one version of her, and the rest stayed behind a velvet rope. We stayed together a little longer, but the trust never fully settled in. Eventually, we stepped back, both knowing we weren't quite in sync. Story 76. He was a part-time DJ. Said he played private parties, mostly for cash. I thought that meant weddings or maybe small clubs. Then one night, I came across a tagged video of him at an adult-themed party. Not just playing music, interacting, performing, part of the attraction. I confronted him. He said it was just part of the gig. They pay for a vibe, he said. That's all. I wasn't angry. I was just surprised he never mentioned it. He said he didn't think it mattered. But it did. Because I started wondering what else he left out. What other things he thought didn't matter to tell me. We lasted a few more weeks, but it never felt the same. When someone edits their truth, it's hard to know where the real story ends. Story 77. She was studying psychology and working nights. Said she did tutoring online. I believed her, never had a reason not to. Then one night, I borrowed her laptop to send an email. The tab was open. It was her streaming platform. She wasn't tutoring. She was doing role-play, therapeutic, intimate, sometimes suggestive. She came in and saw me reading. Froze. Then said, "It's not what you think." She explained that it helped people. Lonely people, people with trauma. She didn't see it as adult work. She saw it as emotional care. I listened. I tried to understand. But I also felt like I'd stumbled into a version of her she didn't want me to see. We ended things kindly. I never judged her. But I also never stopped feeling like a stranger in her world. Story 78. He was a personal trainer with a growing online following. I met him at the gym and we hit it off quickly. He was charming, supportive, and always made me feel seen. One day, a friend sent me a link. "Isn't this your guy?" It was him, same tattoos, same voice, on a subscription site. The content was explicit, solo performances, all behind a paywall. When I asked, he said, "I do it for money. It doesn't mean anything." He wasn't ashamed. Just matter of fact. I appreciated the honesty. But I also realized I'd built a version of him in my head that didn't match the reality. We tried to talk it through. But the disconnect stayed. I didn't feel betrayed, just out of place. Eventually, I told him I needed something different. He nodded like he already knew.